Tonight, I am a dragon slayer. Tonight, I am taking the role of the Far East, China.
Wow.
The Chinese steampunk.
Oh, nice. So how did you get into this? How did you get into it?
I got into it possibly because I used to perform at Dickens Fair. And then one of the directors there asked me if I would be interested in helping form a new group. And that would be the work of Jules Verne. And I'm not sure if the people at Dickens were going to be open to it, but of course he's during the same time period. And they said yes, fine, and it's been a huge success. Yeah.
And the whole thing about STEAM too is, being an archaeologist, I'm very interested in cycles that we see occurring and how different empires rose and fell based on technology.
Right.
So originally we had sail, the power of the wind, and the Dutch used that to spread out and do their mercantilism. Then you had England with all its coal deposits, had the Industrial Revolution, the use of steam. Mm-hmm. Then we had an American era of the use of hydrocarbons, of gasoline and oil. Now we're seeing that era ending.
Yeah.
So it's the technology runs the economy. So who knows what's going to be next? So it's kind of neat to see these patterns. Yeah. And so when you study the past and you kind of detect these patterns of occurring, you're trying to predict in the future in a lot of ways, So what's the next big technology going to be, and what country is going to run it, Yeah, exactly. Is it going to be China who's going to rise up again? Yeah. Because they were once a very great power. People don't realize that.
My name is Jean Bat. This is heavily inspired by the Japanese performance kabuki, but at the same as more stitch punk as opposed to steampunk. Stitch punk is more about using found objects and junk that would normally be thrown away. A lot of this is found things that have been found on the beach, the gem piece. The back panel is actually made out of newspaper bags. A lot of scrap beads, a lot of scrap yarn. There's nails in the back of the head, and all kinds of little odds and ends.
As they say, but I have taken Kung Fu for many, many, many years, so I do know how to use this fighting fan. Yes.
Wow. That's amazing. Do you want to show us your fan? That's beautiful.
Now, this is about 20 years old, so that's why you see the glue is starting to go on it, but so it's not an antique, but I do know how to use it.
Is there anything else that you'd like to share about steampunk? Or
well, I want to reiterate for those people in and around Sacramento that the League of Proper Villains is a really fun group, and they can go online and find them at sacvillains.com.
Fantastic. Thank you. Would you want to talk a little bit about your blog and what got you started on Beyond Victoriana?
Beyond Victoriana started with a very interesting premise. When I was first introduced to the word of steampunk, I had talked with some friends who identified as being steampunked, asked, oh, well, I would like to know more about it because it seems very fascinating. I've always been fascinated with the Victorian era, specifically with the culture and the dynamics of power, especially between these realms of empire and the colonies they controlled. And at first, I was kind of concerned about participating in steampunk, and I asked my friend, okay, so what's the role of colonialism play in it? And my friend looked at me and said, oh, of course, you can do colonialism in steampunk. It happens all the time. We can pretend that we're in the colonies even though we live in America. And I looked at her and I thought, what are you talking about? Because basically it was her idea that the colonies was only this fantasy that people can play with. When in reality, my grandparents grew up in a colony, and it kind of sucked. And the consequences of colonialism is more serious than just a form of cosplay. And so I actually had, sought out to reconstruct these marginalized histories and lost voices to really question these certain premises in which steampunk has been built upon as a sort of fantasy against a flawed history. Which is why Beyond Victoriana is a multicultural steampunk blog that does engage in cultures outside of Europe, but engages them politically and socially, as well as engaging with how people look at and use steampunk today.
I'm actually more interested in the past. Yeah. And one of my, I like to read a lot, so I'm reading a lot about, I told you through Richard Burton and his experience in the British Army and integrating with native cultures, and then really beginning to understand them and seeing that this cultural diffusion, And I think that was really interesting. And then Lawrence of Arabia was another one that I was fascinated with, where he got to understand the culture and realize its value more so than his original aims was to fight the Turks, Yeah. And then the other is the guy who wrote The Lives of the Bengal Lancers. If you ever read the book, they wrote The Lives of because it was only one person. He had so many adventures. Oh, okay. And he had so many experiences, and he wanted to kind of leave the life of a lancer and become a yogi, or learn from a yogi. Yeah, it was really interesting. And he's a British officer. Wow. So they weren't so, sure if he really should be doing that. And he talked to some yogis, said, well, come back in 20 years, and he did. And so he wrote this book. In fact, he brought yoga to England.
Oh, he did?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Sir Francis Brown.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating read, and I have an old 1933 copy, that I just, I read it twice, I read it once and I'm rereading it again, because it just shows that when you have these opportunities to understand different cultures and stuff and integrate, keeping your mind open, you just see the experiences that occur,
Yeah.
And it allows me to, in my mind, travel, and I'd like to go to Nepal. That's kind of what I'm thinking, and to discover, the other side of the world where people have been living, in this fantastic, kingdom, for a long time, and have ritualized their belief systems in such a way that it helps them become better people, and I think that's really fascinating to just see the changes that occur and the changes that don't occur. The traditions and and rituals and so on.
On multicultural steampunk, I think at this very moment today, it is on the brink of being something bigger. But in order for it to succeed, it needs two things. One, it needs active engagement, and two, it means conscientious thought. And by active engagement, I mean it's not just, being able to wear a sari at a steampunk convention. It's being able to talk about the British Raj at the steampunk convention. And it's being able to be Indian American and talk about the British Raj at a steampunk convention, and not feel like they're being shunned or snubbed for talking about serious issues in a fandom space. And conscientious thought means it's something that people should always be thinking about, not just, how can we make this more different, but what is the implications of expanding the definition of steampunk? What does it mean to really truly engage with other marginalized people and their cultures and touch their communities in ways that doesn't just dress up your clothing or make you sound so, cultured and worldly, but actively have an open dialogue about what it means to live in a multicultural society today?